Now, before we get into the limiter, I would like to talk about two more little gimmicks that can come quite in handy when mastering. That's stereo enhancing and reverb. Now, stereo enhancing is again one of those things that does more harm than good when you don't know what you're doing. Because when you overdo it, then things can start to really mush up and nothing seems to have a clear, defined position in your stereo field. And it can also cause some weird phasing issues. And those are, of course, things to avoid. So, if your mix is already pretty good and you made good use of panning and a bit of reverb perhaps, and you have already a nice stereo field and your mix is not too narrow sounding, then you wouldn't really need a stereo enhancer. But we can still use it. But not to fix any issues of a narrow mix, just to enhance the mix again. Give it a hint more life and this bit more of a bigger sound. But of course, we should never do it. Now, let me just do this on Ozone. I actually use other plugins for that, but this is good enough now. Yeah, this right here is just a second 30 Hertz cut that I was talking about. Now, stereo image. Now, the cool thing about Ozone is you can enhance the stereo field of the different frequency ranges. But of course, it can also cause a little bit of confusion. For example, do not think that because the low end should be centered, that you need to go to the first band and suck out all the width of it. That is not a good idea. Let me just show you why, because it sounds really bad, okay? See how some of the power was gone when I just pulled down that lower range? Because we still need a little bit of width on our low end to have our mix sound powerful. So in general, I just leave the first band at 0. And then with the higher bands, I may go a bit up with the enhancing. So the low bands, try something at 10%, and the third band a little more, and the fourth band perhaps maximum 20%. I wouldn't really go above 20 when doing this. So let's see before and after. See, that's all that's needed just to give the mix a little bit more, just a touch more life, just to enhance it. Now, of course, if you're working with a mix where, for example, the overheads are spread really hard left and right, when you have a cymbal going on one side and there's nothing going on the left side, then this kind of stereo enhancing on the individual frequency ranges can come really in handy. Because you wouldn't want one side to be very bright with the cymbals going on and the other side sounding very dull with nothing going on. And in such a case, you could try using the fourth band, boosting it a bit more so you have more of a coherent brightness across your stereo field. But then again, the mix should be as good as possible and in a way that you wouldn't necessarily need it, but if you do, you enhance it. Okay, now let's go to reverb. Same principle again, don't overdo it, otherwise the whole mix will sound too roomy. Now the idea of reverb is to give the mix a final glue, if you will, and put it all into one space, into one room, give it a bit more depth. And yeah, this can also quite help, so let me solo the reverb in this one. air from the ozone. I like the room best. The other two I don't like so much. But anyway, actually I use other plugins for this, but it's just to show you now the idea behind it all. Okay, and here also wet dry mix, I wouldn't put too high, 10% at the most. Again, it's something you don't really hear. It's more something you feel. Yeah, it also gives the reverb a bit of a cut so it doesn't mush up your low end too much and there's not additional sizzling high ends to your already bright mix and bright cymbals and whatnot. Okay. And that wraps this up. Now, as to where to put those two effects, I would generally suggest putting them behind your EQ compression chain. Because, as I said before, take care of your frequencies and dynamics before doing anything else, because those two things are probably the most important parts of mastering and the most difficult parts. But again, take that statement with a grain of salt. Actually, with the compressors I use, I put them between my last compressor and my virtual tape machine. But to be honest, I only do that because the manual of the virtual tape machine suggests to put it as last thing before the limiter to really simulate as if you're printing your mix onto tape. But now here I did it differently, of course. But then again, there's also no right or wrong. So doing one over the other doesn't have that much of a big effect that one would be better than the other. So again, just do what feels right and what gives you the better results. All right, and now that that is done, next part we can go into the limiter, which should be kind of interesting.